Welcome back to Principles in Practice. I'm your host, Chris Heaslip, and today it's a pleasure to welcome Brett Huckins, the Executive Director of Technology and Communication for Gateway Church in Southlake, Texas. Brett has had a very interesting career journey, originally starting as an assistant editor and now running the entire technology and communication teams at Gateway. In this episode, we're going to dive into Brett's story and what he believes were some of the major milestones and how he handled them on his path to becoming a great executive and leader. Welcome, Brett.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Hey, well, we're going to dive in. I would love to hear your story and how you ended up at Gateway Church.
Well, it was interesting. So I think early on back in the day, I met my wife who was actually the daughter of one of the senior pastors, Pastor Tom Lane, at the church. And so I actually met with him to ask if I could court his daughter. And he's like, so a job though? You might want to have that. So that was how it first all got started. But I came on staff actually 14 years ago. I just celebrated my 14-year anniversary 2 weeks ago. So it's been exciting. But came on staff 14 years ago as a assistant video editor in the film team. That's how I kind of got started, and then been there ever since, kind of doing various things.
And so you obviously joined pretty early. I mean, the church was probably pretty small, and how's the church grown over the last 14 years?
Man, it's been incredible. Yeah, I don't remember the exact number of people when I came on staff, and we were in the low thousands. It was it grew dynamically. It was a fast growing church, and one of the fastest growing in America for many, many years. But so over the past 14 years, I've seen a lot of growth, a lot of amazing ministry happen, a lot of things. But, right now we're, obviously with the pandemic, we don't measure the in-service attendance as much anymore, but there's a lot of eyeballs, usually around, we estimate about 100,000 eyeballs on us right now. So definitely have seen a lot of growth through that. I started out in the film team, and was on that team and ended up leading that team for about 6 years. And then they asked me to come step in and actually lead our entire technology team, which kind of consists of the traditional IT, web development, software development, all those kind of areas. Did that for a few years. And then they asked me to also oversee our communications, like our creative and marketing team. So I did that for about 3 years. And then just as of recently, I'm now overseeing those teams as well as the live production team. So all the teams that actually take to get the service, in-service experiences, and also the external expression of that as it goes out all around the world. So it's pretty fun to be able to work with a team that handles from the start of things, like the foundation core of our infrastructure, to what we're going to say and how we're going to say it, and then how we execute it and deliver it to our campuses and all around the world. So it's kind of a start to finish. It's fun to be in the middle of all of that.
Man, I mean, I've had some various interactions with you, as a vendor, obviously, and on the personal side. And I mean, you're an incredible executive. But I guess if we think about, like, it probably wasn't all that way, right? Like, there was some learning that had to happen early. And so take us back to when you made the jump from being an individual contributor in the film team to managing people. What was that like? What were some of the struggles that happened, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, for sure. I fortunately had a small team when I made that jump. I was an individual contributor, and then, hey, can you oversee a team of, 4 people? And so while it's still, significant to when you're managing, leading anyone, it wasn't like I got thrown in, into the deep end right away. But I do remember just, I think about how, like, what has shaped my leadership journey. And even early on, like, what did I do in those early days? I was thinking about that. And just, there's been people in my life, that have poured into me and spoken into me, and, have mentors. I talk about, I married my wife, whose dad is incredible, Tom Lane. And I think about pivotal moments in my life where he sat down with me and just started pouring into me principles, leadership principles and life principles, specific, moments like that to go, I don't know that I would be the leader that I am today without people intentionally pouring into me like that. Also, my brother-in-law is an amazing leader, and just pouring into me and just watching by example as well. but yeah, that moment you have to figure out, all right, so I have more, my responsibility now is to these team members and to the people that I oversee more than the actual work that I'm doing. Cause I'm still doing work as well. Obviously you're not just at that level, you're not just leading, that's your only job, but having to still edit and do some things, but realizing that at that point, my responsibility is to now develop these leaders, and how can one of them replace me one day? Because if I'm ever going to grow and advance, I am unable and eligible for promotion if there's no one that can take my spot. And so trying to like figure out what does that look like on a team, and then as you grow, really getting thrown in the deep end as you go, okay, great, you're going from 4 people to now 30 people. That was a whole that was a whole nother experience as well.
Can you give us some insight into some of those mentoring moments? Were they kind of organic and they happened with Pastor Tom, just kind of organically? Or was it like, hey, I'm struggling with this thing, what should I do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think with him it was organic. It was very intentional. So on both ways, like he obviously if he's saying, well, you may want to, if you're going to think you're going to marry my daughter, I want to get to know you and maybe pour into you. And so that was incredible by his part. But also during the course of that, I realized that, I could go to him and ask questions. Hey, I'm struggling with this. What would you do in this situation? I mean, it's valuable for anyone that you really look up to and trust to go, what would you do? How would you walk through this? I have a challenge. I remember like I think about them now, there were such small little things, but I had no idea. Being a new leader, I didn't know really, now I could probably I make a lot of those decisions on a weekly basis, but then I'm stuck and I have someone who has this attitude or this is their perspective. Can you give me some insight and clarity on that? And that was really great. And it helped a lot. I think also, just looking, I mentioned Todd, or my brother-in-law Todd, just being able to watch how he leads, and he's also at Gateway. So to be able to just watch every meeting that he's leading and every kind of interaction, I would pick apart and dissect. So that would be more of the organic side of being intentional, knowing that I was hungry for wanting to grow myself and develop as a leader. And not everyone is. I had a personal drive to I want to grow and always want to keep growing and be the best leader I can. So I'm trying to hang on to any little thing, any oversight I had, every manager I had, I'm looking at how are they doing things? What's the good? What's the bad? Obviously not everyone's a perfect leader. So you're going, hey, if I, what's working and what would maybe I do differently? And you're evaluating there. So I think some of it being organic, but then for sure with Tom, there was a lot of intentionality behind that as well.
I love that. And so that's people investing into you. And just going back to your previous comment, you mentioned, having this foresight to think about, hey, I've got to actually invest in and grow people who work for me if I'm going to move up. That's a pretty rare insight to have for someone who's just stepping into managing people for the first time. How did you get the insight, and then how did you help to invest in those folks that were working for you? What did that kind of practically look like?
I mean, I don't know how I got the insight other than maybe there's the drive to want to continue to grow and move up, and knowing that, there's no way I can continue to do what I'm doing now if I want to take on more. And so, but honestly, I think for me, it comes from a genuine place of wanting the people that work for me to thrive and to grow and to be all that they are called to be. And if they have leadership in them that they're like, I feel like that one day I want to do these things. I'm going to help you achieve that, because as leaders, as managers, our goal is to help pour into and serve the people that we're leading. And so that has been my outlook, and my goal is to try to pour into them. How can I serve them? How can I get them to where to fulfill their calling and their dreams that they have for their life? Because in doing that, the other thing, mine gets taken care of. I'm growing, I'm developing, and I'm raising up a team. People are seeing that in me and in our team, and they're going, man, what you've done with this team has really been great. Now, could you do that on a bigger scale? And so I think, that's sort of what, at least in my career path, that's how it's been. I tell people that work for me, hey, try not to get frustrated with the here and now. If you believe you're called to do great things, you believe you're called, in your life, you're gonna be here, you're gonna be in this seat at some point. That's amazing. But the way you get there is you focus on being excellent at what you do today, and you serve and you steward what's been asked of you to do today, and you do it with amazing attitude and saying, I'm just here to serve and I'm here to do whatever you need me to do, and I'm going to do it the best that anyone can do it. That as a manager, as a boss, you're going to work with that all day long. You're like, yep, if you have that attitude, and those are the people that get promoted. And I feel like that's what I've tried to instill in my team, is that attitude. And that's the posture I've tried to take. I feel like that's why Gateway goes, cool, now do this. Hey, now would you like to do this? Like, here's more. Can you create that team dynamic on a larger scale?
Did you find that most people were open to that, or were there some people on your team, the 4 people you had to start with, who were like, oh, I don't really want to grow. I don't have the same drive you have. And how did you work with them?
Yeah, I think not everyone has that drive, and I think it's okay. Our job as leaders is to call it out of them, but it's a two-way street. So I believe that it starts with us to be able to see the things, call out, be able to recognize giftings and even blind spots where people need to work on, and call those out. But you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So it's a two-way street in what their giftings are and what they're called to and all that. And some want to grow and excel and soak it up like a sponge and want to continue and will do anything to grow and lead. And they're hungry for that. And some of them are like, some of them aren't interested, and some of them think they're interested, but don't have that makeup, as much. Like, they're like, it's a lot more of a struggle because they're not gifted in that area of leadership. Not everyone is gifted that way. It doesn't mean you can't learn the skill and grow and become that, but like, it means there's some more to overcome if you're not innately wired that way. And so I'm willing to work with those people all day long, but sometimes there's a gap that's hard to close, and maybe they don't have a perspective. Their perspective of that gap is different than ours. And so that can be challenging to have those kind of conversations when there's like, yeah, but your sweet spots are over here and not necessarily over here. It's right here. So if you stay in that lane, you're going to be very successful. But if I promote you over here, it's not going to be good. And then we're going to have to undo that, and everyone's going to get frustrated, and there could be, hurt in the process.
Is there anything that you did to create that growth mindset in your team? Because I think not every team in an organization has that approach, right? Like, hey, one day I'm going to be promoted up. One of you is going to be taking my job. What did you do? What else did you do to kind of create that growth mindset so that people would, really step up and take more ownership?
I think I am really engaged in the team and trying to see kind of what makes everyone tick, and the only way you can do that is by being engaged and present, and then also being able to empower them as well to lead and do things and step out and take chances and risks. So I don't know that I could pinpoint something specific that I'm like, this thing I did cultivated them to feel that way. But I think working for someone who is engaged and also empowering, it gives you the freedom to dream a little bit. It gives you, because if you have an engaged leader, but yet they also empower you, then that is someone that knows your world and is choosing to trust you, like knows all the things that are going. And because they know it, they're still choosing to empower you and to trust you to do your thing. And I think there's a freedom in that, and an excitement, and causes people to have personal responsibility. When you're like, man, my boss could do my job better than me and knows everything there is about it. And but yet he or she is still trusting me and empowering me to do it. And I think there's something powerful, because I think probably a lot of us have worked for leaders that maybe like weren't super engaged, but yet maybe weren't empowering also, or they weren't super engaged and they were empowering, but like, that doesn't mean as much. Like that actually doesn't mean as much, because I don't like you're saying I am empowered, but then if I make a decision, you're like, well, why'd you make that decision? Because you're not engaged on the why behind it anyways. And so that can be really, really frustrating. And so I think that's what I've tried to model. And I think, I don't know, I feel like that's been part of the success of why the team has rallied and wanted to grow and wanted to learn and take on more and things like that.
That's fantastic. And something I've tried really hard to develop as well is giving people the latitude to make the decisions, and then, they get the consequences, good or bad, from that decision, right? Whereas if you make the decision, you're on the hook for the outcome of that. And that person then becomes disengaged because they're saying, hey, now I'm just executing the decision that you've already made. And so they feel like they're just an order taker instead of someone who's actually got a seat at the table to have input to
Yeah.
where the organization's going or how the organization achieves those results.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, along those same lines, like I think people get really confused by the definition of empowerment. I found that when I lead teams, especially teams that haven't been under me, and I come in, I come in new, and it's a whole new culture and all that. And so, but they talk about empowerment on it. We just never empowered. And that may be the case, but also I found too that sometimes there's a confusion with what empowerment actually is, and a lot of people think that empowerment is being able to always make the final call, or well, if I got trumped, so I'm not really empowered. It's not actually accurate, because all of us, unless you're the owner and head of everything, we all are going to get trumped at some point. Like, we all have the potential of that, but that doesn't mean we're not empowered. And so I think shifting people's mindset from that too, because there is something to your point, it is very demoralizing when you aren't given any latitude and leeway to make any decisions. And you're always just, hey, it turns out to be, you're just managing someone else's vision. So on the flip side of that, you give people latitude, but then also knowing there may be times, because if you make this decision, it's going to severely, it could severely cripple something we're doing. So I don't want that. I don't want that to fall on your shoulders. Actually, I'm going to take that from you, because I don't want the catastrophic effects of it to be on your shoulders. But like, as a leader, we have to know that not everything is that. And so a lot of times we're trying to like make sure everything is perfect, and that if my butt's on the line because my team member does something, and they're going to look at me and say, Brett, why did you do this? We have to be able to be okay to know when is the time it's a mission critical decision and when isn't. And most of the time we can empower. Most of the time it's not. But like, I think sometimes if we're more insecure, and what are they going to think? What is the organization going to say? Is my name going to, get dragged through the mud if something happens? We feel like we have to control everything. And then it just makes people die and wither below us. And that's just not good.
Absolutely right. And, my experience is there's really two main reasons you've got to step in. One is because something's not aligned with how we operate, our culture, our values.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, hey, this is not a bad thing. It's just not how we do it here. And you've got some scars from, hey, we tried to do this thing and it didn't work. Someone new comes along and they're like, hey, should we do this? And you're like, this is 6 months and $200,000. I can tell you that it's not going to work. And then people are saying, hey, you're not empowering me. You're not empowering me. And it's like, actually, maybe what we've got to do as leaders at that point is explain the why. Here's why we shouldn't do it, because we tried this and it didn't work. And so there's no use trying it again and spending a lot of money to learn it doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and to your point on values, I tell so I have an interview with every new person that joins our team, actually them and their spouse. It's like a final interview if they're married. So I do an interview, and it's at that point, like, I'm not interviewing for talent and all that stuff. I'm interviewing I'm actually not even interviewing for culture. I think my team would have already done that. What I'm trying to do is less of an interview and more of, I'm going to set the expectation of what it's like working on this team. And I'm going to ask every single person, does that sound like something you want to be a part of? Because I'm going to hold you accountable. We are going to hold you accountable to that. And it's the values of what's important to us. And in those interviews, I usually tell people, you would get fired easily for not reconciling a dispute with one of your coworkers, or not leading with trust consistently, than you will missing 4 deadlines. Like, it's because that's a value that we have. It's how we create healthy teams. It's how we have trust and all that. And so to me, it's those values, like you're talking about. We step in and go, hey, just so you know, this is why we're doing something, or this is the decision we need to make because this is a value of ours, as a department, as a team, as an organization.
You talked about understanding people in the hiring process and getting to know, is this person a culture fit? I think another element of that is, this person, or what is this person's strengths and how can they apply to this role? Do you do personality assessments in hiring, Enneagram, anything like that? And how do you bring that into leading people, and understanding their unique strengths and how to position them best for success?
Yeah, we don't currently use it in our hiring. I kind of informally, we do in our interviews, we'll ask, but it's not like a corporate wide thing at Gateway. But we use strengths. We've been a big strengths culture, but then obviously through recently over the last couple of years, we've been doing Enneagram, not as an organization again, but like just as our teams. And so it is, we will use that to, talk about, to know, hey, this type of role, this type of person, what are their strengths? How are they wired? Is that a good fit, or even predefined before we even go into it? A 5, it would be great. A 6, we kind of like think about what type of person would fit best in this. So I think it's more like, a little bit more organic and not a, set up, like we have this process to do it, but super helpful though. I love those tools and we use them, whenever we can, for sure.
Fantastic. So take me back. You just been promoted the second time from leading one team. Maybe was it leading a second team? What all happened there, and how did that work out? I mean, did you have someone to step in and take your leadership role like you were planning to, or what was the scenario?
Yeah. So, I was leading the film team, and then they had an opening in the executive director of technology role. And I had, in the film team, I had been building up technology infrastructure for the film team alone, because when you're doing video, it's way more intense when it comes to processing and then storage, which is big files, how all the computers are connected. So it just kind of needs its own specialty IT department, and our IT department weren't equipped to service that. So I was kind of doing all that set up. I always had my background. I always just had a love for technology. It was never ever a job before this, but like my uncle was a programmer. I think I just got it wired in me. I just love tech. So that was like, it was like my day job was editing and leading that team. But then like what I really loved was like dabbling in all the technology. So it's kind of like, hey, Brett, are you supposed to be editing this thing? I'm like, yeah, I'll get to that. I'm like crawling under desk and plugging in stuff and all that fun stuff. But so I did that, and over the course of 6 years in that team, when that person resigned, immediately I was like, I want that job. So I went and talked to the person, and they actually said, hey, you're on our radar. So they offered me the job, and come to find out, the hiring manager was like, yeah, there was no one else on the radar. Like there was no one else that could have done it, which was, it's, I don't know if that's good or bad. Like, I'm like, thanks, we didn't have any other choice. But I think obviously into talking to them more and seeing what I had done with the small team, and so on the leadership side, but also the technology side, going, okay, it's a jump. And it was a pretty big jump to go from this one little thing to now it's like, great, you're over the entire infrastructure and over all of what we do technology wise for the church. It was crazy. Like that was probably the most pivotal moment, for me and my leadership growth you have to grow up quick when it comes to leadership from being in like the team of 4 or 5 to like 30, I think it was what it was. And now you have managers who manage people, and that's all, that's different as well. And so at that time we had just had, it was just, I barely remember it because it was such a crazy season. We had just had our triplets. So we have 5 kids. And they're 10, 8, 8, 8, and 6 now. But we had just had triplets, and so literally like 2 months before, they were in like NICU for a while, and then now they're home, and there's 3 of them, so it's a lot. And then they're like, Brett, you have to do, congratulations, you're now over all this stuff. And I'm like, I think I don't remember sleeping for a few weeks where I'm like, I'm feeding 2 babies at once, like looking at my emails that have come in, like which ones I didn't respond to, and it's like, midnight and 1 a.m., 2 a.m. So it was nuts. But yeah, the film team was in a good spot. Handed it over to someone that took it and kept running with it. We actually took all the technology management of it as well. So that was nice too, because it only worked because I was in there, because I was kind of knew what I was doing. But the team they were good at creatives. They weren't technology people. So we just took that over. So that was great. We could just manage all of that. But yeah, it was that part was smooth as far as the transition there. It was just crazy for me as far as I really, as you put on your big boy pants and learn how to lead at a different level. And I look back and I go, yeah, they shouldn't have taken a shot on me. Like they shouldn't have done that. Like that was crazy, but it worked out, I guess.
Obviously it worked out. I mean, you did a phenomenal job leading that team. Was there anything you did in leading into that season, or maybe even some advice you would give other leaders? Hey, look, when you make that jump from I'm leading a team to now I'm overseeing a whole department, what did you do to prepare, and what would you advise others to do to prepare?
Yeah, I actually just had to give this advice to someone who I promoted, and they were peers with they were peers, and then I just promoted them, so now they're leading their peers. And she was like, "What do I do? Because now I have to lead, a big team that I was once a part of." And I worked with a lot of these people, so it was a similar thing. I worked with a lot of these people on a peer level, and so being promoted and so I think it's pretty simple. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it. I don't know, but basically, I would say you go in and you serve. You go in humbly, you serve, and you ask questions, and you go, "I'm just here to make your job easier. I'm here to serve you. I'm here to support you. What do you need?" You don't go in guns blazing with all the things, because I had plenty of things that I wanted to change about that team because I saw it from sideways. I saw how they weren't the most servant-hearted people, and when you're in a service department like IT help desk, you gotta you gotta learn how to serve people well, especially at a church, an organization like that. So really just trying to put all those things that I knew I wanted to change just down for a second and go, all right, I want to get to know you. I want to get to know what you're about, each individual person. So I went to coffee with all of them. And knowing that this is awkward probably for them. I mean, it's weird for them too. Like, we've worked with this guy for 6 years. Like, who does he think he is? Like, you just have to recognize that, and even sometimes calling it out. Like, hey, like I know we worked side by side together for a while, but listen, I want you to know my only job is to make you successful. Like, I really want to do everything I can to serve and support you. And what do you need to be successful? What are your pain points? How can I help? And you start addressing just all the things that their frustrations, and just hearing them out, and come in humbly and serve them. And that's what I told this young leader just last week to do. And I think it may be simple, but that's been my game plan every time, because there's been times where it's in my last kind of, hey, would you take on more, was going back to the communications team where I served on the film team. So when I left technology, I left that team over there, and they were run by someone else, and I went over here and spent 5 years over there, and 4 or 5 years in technology. And they said, hey, would you also now, can we graft in the communications team, the media team back into you, to your oversight? And that was like, so I came back. It was kind of a homecoming to all the people I used to really work with side by side, the same film team, the editorial team, the graphics team, design, all of that, marketing, so that was kind of, so basically it's the same playbook. Hey guys, I'm back. What do you need? How can I serve you? How can I help you? What are your challenges what do we need to solve? And anyone likes to work with someone who feels like that they're on their side, trying to help them solve their frustrations. And again, there's things I wanted to change day one in that, because I could see pretty obvious things that could make that team better from afar, from sideways, and just trying to wait on those things and come in with humility.
Is there anything you did in that situation that didn't work or that you wouldn't do again?
So I brought over, when I went into communications, I brought over a leader from my team. I actually brought two over, one kind of more organically, and one one that I didn't make people report to. I just said, hey, he's a new leader in this team. And then another one that I put people and reported to, but it was like, it kind of came over from like Brett's bringing his regime in,
Yep.
over into leadership. And looking back on it, I think it was probably too much, us versus them. Like, we're bringing in people, where they had everything going. They liked how it was. They didn't see any of the flaws like I did, but they didn't yet. They thought it was great. I mean, they probably had some, some issues that they saw, but they predominantly liked their team. And I kind of came in and started messing with it a little bit much. So I think potentially bringing in that second person and then putting the people under them right away. I think I might have just moved in too strong with trying to change culture quickly, because I felt like it needed it. From a good motive, but I think that it caused some versus me just coming in and going, hey, how can I how can I help you guys? Just you, I just want to hear from you. It kind of came in like Brett and the team kind of just like took over. And so I probably would do that differently, in the future.
Probably the number one failure mode I've experienced for executives, especially joining a company. And at Pushpay, we had just an incredibly strong culture. And I can think of times we hired people from the outside and they wanted to bring their people with them. And in pretty much every case where they brought their people with them within the first 30 days or 60 days, they didn't come in and say, hey, this servant-hearted approach you were just describing before, like, hey, I want to make you successful. Let me understand what the lay of the land is. Let me have one-to-ones with people. And if you had done that, if these people had done that, they would have clearly seen that bringing the people in from the outside that they had worked with, albeit that it made them comfortable because, they knew their playbook, they knew what they needed to do, it actually was going to get rejected by the organization. Because it's kind of like an organ transplant, right? Like you're putting this new organ in, and if you don't do it correctly, the organism will reject the organ, and then it can be really hard to recover from that. And so in a couple of cases I can think of, the leader came in, they said, we're going to be doing it my way. They didn't take the time to learn and understand exactly what you're saying. They brought their people in, and then, two quarters later, both of those leaders who came in ended up moving on because the culture just didn't ever acclimatize to them or this new regime they wanted to have. And so what you're saying here is just exactly right from what I've experienced as well.
Well, and like what's interesting too from my case is that it's not even necessarily from the outside. They were just from a different department, And so I think it applies, both ways. And, either way it's outside, outside the organization or outside the department. Because, at an organization that's large, it might as well be outside, like if these big departments and they are all doing their own things, it still is going to feel like they're coming in from the outside anyways. Exactly. So yeah, it definitely was something I didn't expect. I think I still tried to have the same principles of we are here to serve and help you guys and find out what the pain points. But I think, whenever the thinking, like you touched on it, the thinking is, well, I trust these people, so I'm going to bring them with me to help me. And I think you can to an extent, like depending on what the players are. I mean, because you do need to be around people that can lift your arms up and help support and help you create the culture. Because when you're doing it all by yourself, that's really tough. Because that was like plowing the fields. It was a lot of like plowing in that department for a while until we could like slowly, there was one person I brought in, and then we changed this person's perspective, and it's like you start getting the whole team around the new perspective and the new way, the new culture. And it's not like so because before it was so counterculture. It was just me going, hey guys, we're going to be about the different things. We're going to operate differently. We're going to think differently. And it gets it's hard to do it by yourself. So I understand why people want to bring their people in, but like, you just have to be aware of the impacts it would have. Like you mentioned, I totally agree because I experienced that as well.
Talk to me about so now you're an executive basically overseeing, two different departments. Were there any kind of weekly routines you had? Did you do weekly stand-ups? Did you do one-to-ones? Did you do skip level lunches? I mean, there's all of these tools in an executive's tool belt. Which ones did you kind of do and why?
Pretty much all of those at various seasons. I think I never did stand-ups with my teams because at that point, I actually didn't really even know about them really, and I was just in learning and leadership and things. I just didn't know that was a tool that I could have access to. But as in the last couple of years where that has been a thing where I've been aware of, my teams do it. Like all of our teams will do stand-ups in some sort. But we have gone through seasons where it's either weekly one-on-ones or every other week one-on-ones. But there's definitely an intentionality there, and I think one of the most important things is to prioritize those and to not try not to skip them. Or if you have to move them, then move them. Don't just skip it. But really, that shows value to our people when we prioritize them and to say, as a leader, and we're saying to our direct reports, you are the most important thing to me. Like your success and your development is the most important thing. I'm here for you to make you successful. But if we constantly are moving those around or missing or skipping them, that actually is saying the exact opposite. So our actions are undermining what we're actually saying. And so super important there. Obviously you can't meet, in a large organization, you can't have one-on-ones with everyone, and that's not how it's designed anyway. So like last year I went to coffee with every single person on my team, and that was great. And they were like, "Wait, why are we going to coffee?" I'm like, "I just want to see how you're doing. It's just like catch up." And I would ask people like, "Hey, we talk about family, personal, whatever we want to talk about, but also I want to ask you, hey, is there anything that I need to know about?" I would ask every single person that, because I want to give them an opportunity to share. Some people are gonna be like, "No, everything's good." And like, even if some people aren't going to share, but I want you to always know that you've had an opportunity to share with the boss, what's on your heart, what's on your mind, what's going on. So, hey, is there anything that I don't know? Because I tell them I'm only as good as the information that's coming back up to me. And my direct reports are going to be like, "Yeah, everything's great. It's fine."
Was there anything that came out of that was surprising? Did someone say, "Hey, Jim over here, I mean, he turns up at 10 o'clock and, I'm working here at early." I don't know. I mean, was there any examples of stuff that came out of it? I mean, I've heard of stuff before where I've done the skip levels and someone on the team's like, "Hey, I actually have to run to the other side of the building to get my printing done." And, might have been an accountant or something. And it's like, can we get a printer? I'm like, $100 printer? Like, yeah. I mean, so we got them $100 printer, and then, think of the goodwill that existed from that accountant because we just spent the $100 to buy them something. Was there anything that you can think of that came out of that?
Man, I've been trying to rack my brain while you were talking. I don't think there was actually, when you gave that example, it made me think like there was nothing major leadership wise, because I try to stay pretty engaged with my leaders, and I try to stay and then skip level, I try to stay pretty engaged with those people, like where I'm like, and my leaders know, like, you have to be open-handed if you work for me. You're not going to be like, "Wait, why is Brett talking to my person?" Like and so you have to welcome it, actually. Like, "Yeah, we're great. Hey, Katie, if you need to talk to Brett about anything and that's a level down, like, feel free. Like, that's great. I'm here for you. If you need to talk to Brett, though, go for it." And Brett and my door is always open, and they know that as well. So I try to create that culture. But actually, as you were talking about it more, I can't think of a specific something like the printer, but like, I feel like a lot of those things where it was like, it wasn't major leadership things. It was like, if we just had maybe like a Keurig over here, that would be really cool, because we're having to, you're like, whatever it is. I'm like, "No, that's what I need to know about. Great. I'll take those any day." Or I think it's confusing because we have these two Slack channels and it doesn't make sense. Why, do you think we could combine those? I'm like, "Yeah, it's a great idea. Like, let's do it." So they feel heard. And for me, it's like such low hanging fruit and easy to do. And it wasn't anything major, but I think those things, and it's funny, like I'm wanting to know, like, "Tell me what's really wrong. Like, tell me what's going on." And they're like, "No, everything's great, but like this annoyance over here." I'm like, "Oh, well, yeah, we can fix that." And they're like, "It's you. You're amazing." I'm like, cool. That's all it takes. I love it. So yeah, there were some of those things that came out of it, and that was great. And so we did kind of try to do some coffees, and then I also tried to take teams out, like to lunch to go, "Here's the design team, here's the film team." And so as a team, I want to hear, "Hey, how do you think things are going? How do you think how the dynamic of your team, or is there any friction with other teams that, you're experiencing right now, and how can I help?" So I try to like do those little tiers of things of how I can stay engaged with what's going on.
So you talked about engagement, like doing these as engagement. For me as a leader, the two things I think about is my team engaged? The second one is, are they growing? And you talked a lot about how you personally grew. Is there anything you do to try and create that growth-oriented culture in your team? I mean, one thing we do at Leadr is we have a CEO book club. So if you want any kind of book that's going to help you in your role, we're going to buy it for you. And there's people like, well, we spend whatever thousands of dollars a year buying books, but I'm like, look, if someone can't get an ROI on a $15 book, then I mean, we're doing it wrong. Do you have any examples of things you implemented? Maybe you send people to seminars, maybe you send them videos all the time. How do you create that growth culture?
Yeah, good question. I think so. We have budget dollars set aside for, training and development and things. And that can be, we do send people to conferences, and, I think our team knows that if they wanted a book or if anything, they could let us know and we would get that for them. Because like you said, the amount you spend on a book, is so nominal compared to what the development in a leader. So yeah, we do those things. I think also, we do the, subscriptions for services. So like some of our, our devs, like, can we get a subscription to, the Udemy and things like that, like online learning tools. I think one thing that so really what we're trying to do is provide tools, tools in their tool belt to help them grow. And then it's up to them whether they're going to use that tool. But I know for me as a leader, I'm trying to like amass tools, and I'm more naturally wired that way, like we talked about, but other people maybe not. So here's some suggestions. Here's some things you can do. I think the other thing that we do, it's not necessarily down the same vein you're saying with these type of tools, but it is something intentional in our culture, and then probably in a lot of cultures too, but like really trying to give feedback. And so it's not like it's not like I here read this book, but we're intentional about trying to create leaders. And so in order to do that, then we need to be able to give candid and honest and open feedback. And we have a gateway. We have a kind of a thing we call a social covenant that the whole organization it's just basically, here's how we're going to act as an organization. Everyone's like, we know that's our social covenant. And one of those is that I will solicit feedback. I'll give feedback, I'll solicit feedback. And so that actually helps us to create a culture to where when I need to give you a piece of feedback, constructive feedback, you don't have the right to get defensive. Like if you do, like, cause that's kind of our natural nature as human beings, as insecure sometimes. And, we're like, hey, like tone it back off. Like, why are you coming at me about this thing? But like part of our culture, if you're going to work at Gateway, you have to welcome that. So you have to go, okay, I need to get my heart and mind, right about this, and welcome that feedback. But what that does, I think it's allowed us as a staff and as a leadership staff to open the door to be able to deliver that feedback to people. And here's how I found that has worked for me in delivering feedback is and how we kind of tell our leaders, because no one loves to be able to have a tough conversation with someone, like a growing conversation. Hey, when you do this is the negative output, or hey, you're doing this behavior and like that needs to change. So no one loves those conversations, unless maybe you're an 8 and you just like to get in battles with people all the time. But yeah, Chris, you love these conversations, but like, so I don't like them, but like, and I think a lot of my leaders don't particularly love having difficult conversations, those candid conversations. And so what I've told them is, listen, you need to have those conversations with people because you're actually doing them a disservice. And you can even approach it to say, hey, listen, I want to have a difficult conversation with you, but it's because I want you to have the most influence in this organization as possible. And there's some things that you're doing, or this thing that you're doing is diminishing your influence. And so this is all about you. This is all about, I want to set you up for success. So it's just, it kind of goes on the theme of, I'm here to serve you and help you become a better version of you. So when I have to bring something to your attention, I'm going to say, hey, listen, when do you realize that like this whole meeting, every time someone says something, you kind of looked off and rolled your eyes, like that will diminish your influence with that person, with that department. And I need you to have the most amount of influence. I want you to have the most amount of influence in this organization, never to lose that. So that's something that you need to be aware of that you do when you're frustrated. So just, and hey, I'm going to call you out on it. You have your permission to call you out on it. Yeah. All right, cool. So I'm going to let you know when I see that. May have a code word and I'll like wiggle my ear or something, but like, it really is. I think that's something that we've done intentionally to try to help keep our people growing, is to be able to have those candid and open conversations with them.
That is fantastic. And creating an organization where you can have conflict like that is such a healthy sign, because it's actually dysfunctional to not engage people like that. And then over time, they feel like, hey, I'm doing an A+ job. You think they're doing a D+ job, and there's this gigantic expectation gap. And of course,
that was really tough. That was really tough. I just took over. The last department I took over, it was I had to make some leadership changes there, and it was tough to. I had to be really candid and honest with the leader, and they were like, I don't understand, like, I this is the first time I'm hearing this, or I don't understand. And I had to just say, I'm sorry that no one had the courage to tell you these things before, or or they weren't engaged enough to know it, like
Yep.
could have been two things, but either rate, it stinks for that person. It's tough. And it puts the people that come in behind you at a disadvantage if you're not stepping up and having those courageous, conversations with our people.
Yeah, and Jack Welch used to have a saying that, exactly what you're saying is it's not fair on the employee if you see those things and you don't bring it up. And the
Yeah.
example he always used was, let's say that Jenny, in accounting was not performing well, and, you've got 10 people on the team, and let's say she was the bottom performer, and she, you kind of go through the performance review process, you don't tell her. And then one day we have layoffs and we go to Jenny and we say, Jenny, look, I'm sorry, we have to make a 10% staff reduction, you're being let go. And Jenny's going to say, well, why am I being let go? Well, Jenny, because you're the bottom performer. And then Jenny's going to say, well, no one's ever told me that before.
Mm-hmm.
So, doesn't mean we need to embrace the kind of rank and stack, or what's it called, rack and stack kind of approach, that was common in the early 2000s. But what we do have to say is, look, here's our standard as an organization, and right now you're not meeting that. And let's work together. What you said, the servant-hearted approach, just work together to really, close the gap so that you feel like you're contributing and I feel like you're contributing as well.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things that, when anyone leaves our organization, I would hope that they never get blindsided by it. Like that means that's the worst, when someone's like, I didn't understand, or I didn't know that I was falling short, that was not meeting expectations. That to me is 100% on a leader. If they didn't communicate, if they thought, and they're like, no, I've had all these conversations. Well, clearly you didn't communicate. Something was lost in translation. And that's what we want to try to avoid at all costs.
Exactly right. Two more questions before we jump into the quickfire round. I'd love to hear about how you do career tracks and career pathing for people who work for you. Do you sit with them at some point and say, hey, look, where do you want to go with your career? Is it that intentional, or is it more kind of fluid? Because it seems like, it was a logical step for you from film into IT, and then to obviously oversee the production side again. Obviously, how do you get that right for the staff who work for you?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously with my people, we're having those conversations, and I'm always trying to figure out, who's my next man up, who again, kind of goes back to the very first conversation about if I'm ever going to be able to do more, I have to be able to replace myself. But I think with the people on our staff, I think it's more organic. We don't have, I think Gateway as a whole wants to develop some systematized approaches to like moving people along, using competencies, like low major competencies and all that, moving people. And I love all that. It's great. Like in order to be an executive director, here's the skills and the competencies you need. It's fantastic. And I think that paired with what we're already doing, which is more of that relational, organic approach of just talking to people and saying, because there's some times where people aren't thriving in their job, and you want to kind of dig in and try to figure out, is it just personal going on? Is it, that like we moved them, or they, we thought we moved into this seat and they thought this is going to be great, but just is not clicking. And so we're having to work through. And so like, even just a couple of weeks ago, I was talking with a manager who was talking about one of their employees, and we were just like, what is the right seat? I don't know that what they're doing right now is it. And they were like, yeah, I don't think it is either. So why don't you go have a conversation, start those conversations and go, hey, where do you want to be? Like Gateway is great because of a lot of different things, and we're unique because we're a church. So we have ministry lane, and we have kind of operations and all that. There's a lot of different factors, or business and ministry. And so it's a big organization, and we can talk about, hey, do you really want to be on this side of it? Or do you want to be doing this? And like, it's okay. And if it's not on this team, that's amazing. It's amazing if you're called and you're supposed to be somewhere else, because that means the fit over here, someone else is supposed to be on this seat, and we can just align. So having those conversations, I actually recently just talked with my team. We do a monthly leadership meeting, lunch, and it's basically 2 hours. And I take all the leaders that have people to reporting to them, and we just pour into them intentionally. Part of our goal in that is we call it the term, we want to be a leadership factory. We want to develop leaders. That's the goal. Oh. And so we have to be intentional with that. And so we said, when we wrote on the board, we're going to be a leadership factory as a goal. Okay, what does that mean? How are we going to do that? So we have to be intentional. And so one of these is this monthly lunch. And so this kind of analogy just came to me in the moment. and I shared with them because unveiling some changes to all the departments, like some small, some pretty major, but it was basically a lot of time before the meeting really started got spent on just communicating changes, because you're the leaders, you need to know about these. But in the course of that, I just felt this impression of, why do we make changes? Because I think people can get frustrated with changes. They call it change fatigue. Just, it's like, why are you guys always, why are they always tweaking things, and always making changes?
Yep.
And so I said, here's the deal. Like, here's what you got to understand. We are trying to follow and be obedient to what our goals are, whether that's for us ministry and church, like what is God saying, where are we going, what's our goals of the company, like what are the goals of our organization, who's our CEO, what are they saying we're going. So that's the top of the spear, top of the triangle. But then on one leg of the triangle, we have the organizational structure and just how it's all organized, where everyone sits, like all that, the goals of maybe the departments. And then on the other leg, we have people's sweet spot, their calling, their giftings, all of that. And so what we're trying to do as leaders is make sure that triangle is always in perfect alignment. We're going, and sometimes it gets a little misshapen over here, so we're tweaking. We're going, oh wait, what is their gifting, and how do they fit in this organization, and like the structures, and then how does that affect the goals that we're trying to accomplish and what we've heard, where we're going? And we're like, we're tweaking to that, and and so it's constantly this tweaking of this triangle, just trying to keep it into a perfect triangle. And so I try to explain my heart with them and to go, hey guys, I think that, and Pastor Todd, my brother-in-law, actually coined this for me, so I don't want to steal it, but I said, hey guys, I think that we always talk about change fatigue. I think we need to change our terminology to build change endurance. Because if we're a growing and dynamic organization, change is inevitable. So we can't be frustrated with change. We have to learn to embrace it and get change endurance instead of the fatigue.
I mean, that's an incredible amount of intentionality that you're building into your culture, which is incredibly impressive. I mean, most organizations, as you say, are just trying to endure the changes and say, okay, let's just try and survive this change so we get through to go back to what we're doing. So that's really impressive.
We were there, and it's tough. So it's like, we got to get on the other side of it and be more intentional about it. Cause it's not fun being, yo-yo, just trying to figure out where to go. So like, we need to pour into our leaders.
Well, speaking of change fatigue, last thing I'd love to dig into just before we go to the quickfire round is, obviously COVID has, brought so much change in such a small period of time. And I think even for you personally as a leader now, really, engaging in boardroom conversations more and understanding how the organization operates at a higher level, maybe just take me through what are some of the changes that COVID has meant for you, for Gateway, because I think it's just, it's changed a lot of how you operate.
Yeah, for sure. It's changed everything. Like a lot of it in a good way, honestly. Like I think, the church as a whole has had a playbook that they're running over and over again. And I think this threw a wrinkle in everyone's business, and church is included in that as well. And so, yeah, I got to, they asked myself and our communications director, and then kind of our PR guy to join on a task force, so as soon as this hit, we jumped on and started meeting every day because, things were changing every day. Information was changing, guidelines, lockdowns, all that stuff. So we just stayed in sync every day. And that was really cool to be a part of and to see, at another, like you said, at a higher level of leadership with kind of all the strategic team, the people in the room making all the calls. It was great to be in sync with our leaders tightly as for our organization. But we pivoted, to online, obviously, like everyone else did. But one of the cool things that we did early on, probably within like week 2, was that we sent a text message out to all of our people in our database from their campus pastors. So, hi, this is Derek, wanted to reach out and see if you're okay. Please let us know if you need anything. And we had all of our campuses and all of our staff just there responding to people. And it was, I still hear when people say, man, you sent me that text message, like it meant so much. And then we went and we personally called 130,000 people in our database. And we worked through those over a month probably and just called every single person. So when I say there's things about it that I loved that's come out of it is I feel like personal touch, like a big organization, a big church can be can sometimes function as this big behemoth thing and forget that like we're really just here to serve people and to help people, whether you're a church or a business, like you're trying to help serve, meet a need and help serve a problem, help a problem and serve people. And so being able to get back to really doing personal ministry for us as a church was incredible. We also kind of spun up quickly services for other demographics that we didn't have. So we spun up like 3 different kids services based on age group. And we also pivoted and created a whole Spanish service as well. So like in a matter of weeks, we created all this new content that we didn't have, and we're still doing them to this day. So when I say that like COVID hit and changed everything about what we did, I think it actually did us a service, and we could get rid of an old model maybe, or like get rid of parts of an old model and really infuse new ways into how to really reach people and pastor and love and serve people. That we were just so stuck in like these event modes. And when you can't do events, you're going, well, now I don't know how to be a church. Well, was not about events. Like it was never about, let me put on this thing and you come and like get from us. Like we need to go out to you, and we want to go out and meet your needs. And that's where I feel like we've really shined as an organization over the last few months. It's like we've been trying to go out and we did feed people at the hospitals, like once or twice a week, providing food for people, doing prayer events at hospitals. We had nights of worship where we did drive-in nights of worship, all these things, just trying to like create things out in the community. So I've been really proud of that. And it's been cool to see our organization kind of shift and put a re-emphasis on how do we meet the needs of people in our congregation. So it's been pretty incredible.
And you also had done implemented some projects before COVID hit that allowed you to scale. Lacking across, all of the staff. You put a new phone system in so that people could work from home.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Was it?
We were ready. We were ready for it, not really knowing that we were doing that. I mean, I was doing it because I was trying to all of what we were doing is try to be scalable. So we want to launch campuses. We have a campus in Wyoming. This is our first one out of the state. And so you have to think differently when you're not all connected by the same, network lines right there. You just gotta think differently. So yeah, we had the organization on Slack. We had moved to a cloud-based phone system. We had, implemented Zoom, like literally probably 6 months before we had switched over to Zoom, which is a way more reliable platform than what we were using before. But then getting people into that, even the culture of using these tools. So that's a whole nother thing. Just to like sign the contract and say, hey, we have it available is one thing. We had started those kind of grassroots approach of like, hey, when you do a meeting invite, include a Zoom link, because don't expect everyone to come drive to you. Like, yeah, it's, and some people did, some people didn't. Well, then guess what? Now everyone's including a Zoom link in their meetings because that's the way of COVID. We have to now. So, but like just being ahead of those, it felt really good for me as, a technology leader to feel like, okay, I had somewhat of my stuff in order so that we didn't have to just start scrambling immediately. But if you actually think about it from our perspective, what's good about that is it allowed us to do ministry quicker. So we had just also gotten a short code 71010 that you can text, and had it all set up with Slack so that the text messages come into Slack. And what's great about that is that we can put tons of volunteers and tons of pastors in Slack for free, and they can just respond to these thousands of people that are coming in. Well, that was done like a couple of weeks before COVID hit. And just thinking, hey, we need to have a tool like this to help people. So what I love, not to like pat ourselves on the back, what I love is that we were able to help people. We were able to help facilitate ministry quicker and respond quicker when it all happened. That's the best part about it all.
Would you tell our audience your phone number so they can try and hire you?
Just text 71010 Gateway Church.
No, seriously, to have all of that in place, and then to be able to roll into COVID and be in that place is, I think, just an incredible testament to your leadership that you're in a position to do it. So it's fantastic.
Amazing team.
All right. In the last few minutes we've got available, let's jump into the quickfire round. 5 questions, short answers each one, and then one kind of meaningful question I'd love to ask you to wrap up. So first question is, aside from the Bible, what is the most impactful leadership book that you've ever read?
I think Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. I've read it every couple of years, reread it. So a lot about how I lead is from those principles of in that book.
Cosign. If you could only choose one word to describe your leadership style, what would it be?
Engaged. We use that word a lot in our talk about being engaged, and I think probably one of the most important things for a leader.
Okay, number 3. What is your biggest distraction working from home?
You know the answer to this question. I'm gonna go 5 kids with triplets. Like, hey, Daddy, are you on a Zoom call?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm looking forward to going back to the office to get some work done. All right, number 4.
Yeah.
What's your biggest failure?
Probably too long of a story, but I'll just keep it short. I think back in Gateway, there was a product that we tried to do. We tried to be a service provider to churches, and as you know, that's not just something you go, yeah, we're gonna just make a company and have an app and give it away. So I think that that experience was, although it wasn't squarely on my shoulders, I definitely should have. There's parts where I could have led that situation better and not let it go down the road it went down, or pulled the plug quicker on it, voiced my concerns quicker.
Just if I summarize it, would it be trying to do something that's outside of your core competency?
100%. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, last question, and feel free to take a little longer on this one to kind of wrap up our interview. I just have a philosophy that people often sometimes forget all of the work, the accolades and all of that. 20, 30 years from now, people are going to remember how you made them feel. So tell us a time that someone believed in you when maybe they shouldn't have.
I feel like that's every step along the way in my career. But no, I think about that moment of going from the small team to 30 people. And I think, I felt like I could do it, but I mean, there was so much I didn't know, but definitely our leadership took a chance on me, a kid, to now oversee most of the people who are older than me, and so they definitely took a chance on me, my age, my experience, all that, and just to step in that role. So I think about that often, honestly, when I'm mulling over decisions and I'm going, oh man, I think they may have what it takes, but oh gosh, they're only 26, or they're only, whatever you're like, oh man, they've only been doing this for 2 years or whatever it is. And I honestly think back to go, someone believed in me to take a chance on me. They saw something in me. So what is it that I'm seeing in this person? What is that thing that's drawing me to it to go, just let me have a chance to coach them. Let me there's something there, and I can coach that up. And so I do think back to that moment when my life was crazy and I didn't know really what I was doing. And they said, I believe in you. I feel like you have what it takes. And had that not happened, yeah, I don't know where I'd be. So I'm super grateful for that.
And think about all the people, years from now who are going to come back and say, hey, Brett believed in me and it made a huge difference.
Well, I think I told you this the other day, but, having my 14-year anniversary celebrated, one of my direct reports was, super kind and posted in our team Slack channel, hey, we're not going to let the day go by without, letting everyone know. He wouldn't want you to know, but it's Brett's, anniversary. So, hey, let's tell him how much, he means to us. And they just, started coming in. I'm like, I can't look at that. I can't look at those right now. We went to dinner and I had my wife, can you just read them? I just want to, I'm ready to absorb. And I'm just, got really emotional. And I posted back to the team just saying thank you. But I said, it really is like a sweet time capsule. Because as a leader, you try to do your best every day. You get it wrong sometimes, you make mistakes, but you're trying to do these principles that you believe in. You're trying to serve others, and you're trying to call them and believe the best, and you try to fight for unity. You're contending for unity, and want to see great results, and you really want to see people elevated and go past yourself. And so you're doing all these things. You're doing the hard work day in and day out. You don't really get to see it. And so what was cool about that is getting a time capsule and a glimpse of all the hard work over the last 14 years. Here's here's just some of the wins. And like, I wouldn't have been, thank you for calling me and asking me to come. Thank you for asking me to step up, like pouring into me and being intentional about that. And it just was a cool reminder that what we do matters and that it's affecting people and it's important. And so I had a really good week a couple weeks ago, just being able to glean in all that and remember the goodness over the last 14 years.
And that's what leadership is, right? Is leading people at the end of the day. So, well, what a phenomenal note to end on, Brett. I just want to say thank you for making the time for this. I know this has been, I've got pages of notes here I want to go and implement straight away, but thank you so much for making the time to share with us your experience. And our audience is going to find this incredibly helpful.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris. I love what you guys are doing at Leadr, and I'm excited that you're helping people as well develop in their leadership. So thank you for having me. It was truly an honor. I'm glad to be here anytime.
Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Principles in Practice. Don't forget to check out the links in the description below for some free downloadable resources and to get more information about Brett and Gateway Church. And while you're there, feel free to hit that like button, share, and subscribe to stay up to date with all of our new content. We'll see you next time.